Oh, delay. So, Final Fantasy VII Remake was delayed. Who would have guessed? Everyone. Everyone would have guessed. Since it was delayed, I wanted to look and see what other people were saying. It's okay, because we want it to be beautiful in the game of dreams. I would wait another decade if I had to. The only disappointment is having to figure out how I can get time off to play and truly enjoy the game with the new date. Completely fine with this decision. Go ahead and let the games bake a bit more in the oven until they are actually ready to get put out. I, for one, appreciate this move. Thank you, Square Enix. 5 years really isn't a long time. Lol. I'd rather a game be in development for ages and release polished and with minimal bugs. They're just trying to do the right thing. I've waited over a decade for this. I can wait a few more months. Yevon knows I don't want another rush job like Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3 turned out to be. Wait, those were delayed too.
A delayed game is eventually good, but a rush game is forever bad. Shigeru Miyamoto.
Wow, that's surprisingly tame. I'm all for level and cool-headed responses. But it honestly seems like people just have forgotten how many times Square Enix has done this. I feel like Square Enix has...
Back up.
I feel like Square Enix has constantly delayed games. Is that just my feelings, or is that reality? I decided to check. So, in order to determine how many games Square Enix has delayed, I looked over the last 5 years, and I only chose games in which they developed themselves or co-developed with another studio. I also didn't choose phone games or arcade games. Out of the 22 games that Square Enix has developed themselves and released within the last 5 years, drum roll, 9 of them were delayed. The list of delayed games in no particular order are Romancing Saga 3, Chocobo's Mystery Dungeon Everybody, Kingdom Hearts 3, Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition, Monsters of the Deep Final Fantasy 15, Kingdom Hearts 2.8, Saga Scarlet Grace, Final Fantasy 15, and Romancing Saga 2. Now, I don't know about you, but 40% of the games being delayed in the last 5 years is ridiculous. You may not see that as a lot, but I think that that's exuberant. That is a ridiculous amount of delays in 5 years. Pause. Well, at the last second, apparently, Square Enix has also delayed Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Remastered Edition. I didn't know that this was a thing until now, and apparently it happened December 11th. So about a little over a month before the game's release. I mean, I'm really not surprised. I mean, that is the reason I'm making this video, but how are people just okay with this? And if we look at the comments, it's the same thing as with 7 Remake. Take all the time you need. More companies need to follow this example. Blah, 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 blah. It's the same thing. Someone said it. A delayed game is eventually good, but a rush game is forever bad. Oh my god. It's everywhere. Oh, and this also changes their percentage of delayed games from 39% to 43.5%. So we might as well just put this in there too. Back to your scheduled programming. Now, normally a game being delayed doesn't really mean a whole lot. Like, it doesn't mean that the game will be bad, and it doesn't mean that it'll be of lesser quality. It's like the Shigeru Miyamoto quote that people always shit out of their mouth. It's technically true. I don't think that it's wrong. I think that a delayed game should be better. I generally agree with that concept, but that's definitely not true in practice. And I think that Square Enix is a perfect example of why this truism isn't true. We can look back at two major delays from Square Enix to really focus on what I'm talking about. These games are Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3. Both of these games were given the exact same reasons for their delay as were Final Fantasy 7 Remake. You know what? Let's just look at some of the announcement video for Final Fantasy 15's delay.
ご覧になっている皆さんは8月15日またはそれ以降の日付です。最初に報告をさせてください。ファイナルファンタジー15のマスターバージョンを先日完成させました。マスターバージョンというのは、マスター版とも言いますが、皆さんがゲームを購入したときに、ディスクに入っているものと思ってください。我々としては多くのユーザーの皆さんに満足できる品質になったというふうに考えています。このマスター版による30分以上のゲームプレイビデオを現在作成中です。
Now, when it comes to Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3 being delayed, I think that it took something from them. And, in my opinion, felt hollow. These games aren't bad, per se. I mean, you can see my opinions on Kingdom Hearts 3 if you want to click up there. But there's generally always a sacrifice in them, and I think that it's always the story and pacing. The pacing in Final Fantasy 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3 are absolutely awful. But I know what you're saying. Final Fantasy 7 has already been made before, so the story and pacing should show up in the remake, right? Well, good thing Final Fantasy 7 Remake is in parts. Yep, you heard that right. This game will be in multiple parts. And considering the current state of Square Enix, multiple parts sounds like the perfect recipe for a disaster. But I'm sure they know how many parts this game's gonna be in, right? They don't. They don't know how many parts. Kotaku news editor Jason Schreier stated on his Twitter, just asked Yoshinori Kitase how many games are going to be in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. He said he can't say yet because we don't know ourselves. That's right, they don't even know how many parts Final Fantasy VII Remake will be in, and that's a huge issue. Like I stated before, there's always something missing from their games that are generally delayed, their big titles like Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy. This is an issue here, especially because this game will be placed into multiple parts. Typically, when you have a multiple part series, you plan that series in advance, story-wise and everything else. If I were to read this optimistically, I would say that it doesn't mean that they didn't plan the story in advance, it just means that they're not sure how many bits and pieces they would chop it into. But this is Square Enix that we're talking about. This is a company that's delayed games over and over and over, and they typically come out with the story that took the biggest hit. So if I were to make a guess, I'm thinking that they're just playing it by ear. They create a story for the first part, and then right before they get to the second part, they decide to make a story then. This is especially bad because they're taking it from an already full game. They're making part 1 strictly Midgar. Again, this isn't necessarily a bad idea if you've already planned out every part in advance, and the story will work cohesively with all of them. But I don't think that they've done that, and Midgar is not a huge percent of the original Final Fantasy VII. If we're going to be generous here, I would say that Midgard consists of around 15% of Final Fantasy VII. So then what does this mean for the other parts? Does this mean that there will be more than than 6 parts of the game. I mean, I can see Square Enix doing 7, they're
quirky like that.
but I don't know if that's what this means. Are there only going to be 3 parts in which the Midgar elements now consist of 33% of the overall game? Are the other games going to be longer? Are they going to be shorter? Honestly, we don't know. And to me, that's kind of scary because Square Enix isn't known for pacing anymore. They don't know how to pace their stories. And so when they're pacing them across multiple titles, that gives them a lot more room to fail. But Square Enix is used to failure, and the way that they fix it is DLC. Square Enix definitely has a DLC problem, and they overuse it way too much. When they released Final Fantasy 15, they kept releasing patches that supposedly, quote-unquote, fixed the game. They completely revamped a chapter, they added a bunch of cutscenes, they fixed other cutscenes. It's like you really can't expect the original version of Square Enix games to be the complete versions of those games. They always leave something out, or something is so unpolished that they end up having to fix it with patches. This is, again, another huge issue for the Final Fantasy VII Remake, since the remake will be in multiple parts. Are each parts going to be treated as an individual Square Enix game? They've already said such in interviews that this is as big as an original Final Fantasy game, but my issue with that is, are they going to treat this like they treated 15? Are they going to continually add more and more patches to this game? What's going to happen when they patch parts while they're working on future parts? Or are they not going to patch anything? And if it is like 15, just be ready for them to take out parts of the story so they can give it to you through DLC, just like they did with Gladio, Prompto, and Ignis. Major portions of the story were just removed so that they could sell them later on. Or when they stated they wouldn't be adding the ability to play as other characters, but then later on down the road they then added that ability. Honestly though, this is Square Enix's specialty. They butcher their stories, feed it to us piecemeal, and then want us to be grateful. I'm always hopeful, but with the current state of Square Enix, I'm also always wary. Look, I'm not just a naysayer. I really do hope that this game is good. Well, games. I really hope that these games are great. Deep down, I really want Square Enix to return to telling compelling narratives and doing it with a depth that they haven't had for the last few years. I think that all the signs are pointing towards this game just being fine, and that's what worries me the most. But what do you think about this? Do you think that Final Fantasy VII Remake will actually be great? Do you think that all of these signs are for nothing, and that they actually don't point to this game being a disaster? Or do you think that it'll just be fine? If you liked the video, you can subscribe or thumbs up. Thank you for watching.